Qualifications for personhood. Is it size? Pro-choicers point out that a child aborted in the first trimester may be, it's only 1 to 2 inches in size. It weighs less than 1 or 2 ounces. I was in a debate with somebody from Planned Parenthood years ago, and they're making this point, and I go, so? What? You know, so like, speaking of professional football players, is a jockey less human than a NFL tackle because he weighs possibly 1/3 of what? Seriously? I mean, what does size have to do with anything? Is it IQ? I'm going to skip some of those. It's just not. What about someone who develops a mental handicap? Do they go from being human to inhuman? At that point, what about someone who's unconscious, sick, or even asleep? Well, you say, that's a temporary condition. Well, what about when sickness is permanent? And they're more and more incapacitated. You see this logic all the time related to somebody with Alzheimer's. You'll talk to people who are still married and they're dating someone else because, after all, the person they've known and loved and made marriage vows to is gone. Well, actually, they're not. They have an address, and you could go visit them, and you sure should. Or they still live in the same home, or whatever. Once you have a sliding scale of what constitutes a human being and what doesn't, you really are where, and people hate, any pro-choice advocate hates any comparison to the Holocaust. But the demeaning of a people group, the parallels are legitimate parallels. And as blacks were demeaned systematically, and Jews, and gypsies, and handicapped, disabled people, you know, the preborn children have been depersonalized. Is it a stage of, yeah, let's move on. Yeah, this question that I mentioned before, you know, the small, the weak, the vulnerable, you know, don't they actually deserve more protection? Scripture says this: speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Proverbs 31, 8 and 9. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and needy. There's lots of scriptures in that regard. If we have time, and we likely won't at the end, we'll get some other scripture. Otherwise, you're welcome again to the PowerPoint slide and the books that go in to present the biblical case. So there's only one objective point of origin for any human being, and what is that? When does human life really begin? Conception. What science clearly shows is the moment when a new, utterly unique human being, synonymous with person, comes into existence. Okay, so what about this argument? A woman has the right to control her own body, and neither the government nor anyone else can tell her what she can or can't do. So some pro-choice advocates say, even if the unborn are human beings, they have fewer rights than the woman. You see how this has changed? Before it was blob of tissue, bunch of cells, and then, well, that didn't work anymore. It worked extremely effectively at first. It worked effectively in the Roe v. Wade days. But as science, you know how usually Christians are portrayed as being the people who are against science and scientific discovery and all this kind of stuff. It's the pro-choice people are definite, and we'll touch on this later, but there are numbers of people who are pro-life who are not Christians. Nat Hintoff, who was a Village Voice editor, a well-known atheist, was a strong pro-life advocate because he just simply saw consistently, if I'm going to defend the lives of this person, that person, and if I believe in racial justice and I believe justice for people of all types and shapes and sizes, then I would believe in justice for preborn children. I used to, at rallies I used to go to, we'd have pro-life rallies, and there's a group that would show up, not a large group, but they had their signs, Atheists for Life. I loved those guys and one gal. And I'd hang out with them and I'd, say, hey, let me tell you about Jesus. I don't want to know about Jesus. I'm just here to defend unborn children. Put my arm around him and said, well, thank you. I wish many of my Christian friends were as committed to the sanctity of life. Well, I don't know that I'd call it sanctity because they know where I'm going with that. Well, why are they valuable? They're created by God. If they're just the product of nothing but blind time plus chance plus nothing, then maybe they really aren't valuable, and maybe none of the rest of us is either. But when you believe that they're created by God in His image, there's no higher reason to believe, better reason to believe that these are really people and they really have rights.